Good evening. Welcome to the Leader's Edge. And tonight is season 3, episode 4, the final episode of the year. Goodbye, 2020. And hello, 2021. Tonight, our topic will be all about the culture and psychology of leaders. Our guest tonight is Mr. Day Lee. Day is currently the managing partner of a company called The Fourth Wall, which specializes in culture design. He focuses on behavior and information to build shared cultures for organizations so that they can reach and sustain their peak potential. He has the goal of making each member of an organization stay because they want to, not because they have to. His human centered approach emanates from a deep seated empathy and disciplined structure from his design background. This is also cemented through an understanding of the human psyche through the intensive practice of military psychology under the United Nations Armistice Commission. But he is also unique in that he is certified in the Lego Serious Play method, currently facilitating lectures and workshops internationally, and check this out, makes book summaries during his free time on the Daily Book Club, his YouTube channel. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to center stage our special guest, Mr. Day Lee. Day?
And thank you so much for that introduction. It's very, I don't even need to introduce myself anymore because of that. Okay, so I'll be just sharing my screen just so we could talk about the topic today, right? So it's the psychology and culture of leaders. So when I say that, does anything come to mind for you? Do you know before
Well,
we actually do begin?
thank you so much for asking. When I do think about leadership and psychology, what comes to mind is the mindset. Oftentimes, without a proper mindset, leaders might either give up too soon or remain too stubborn. Because after all battles are won in the mind first before they're won anywhere else.
Yeah, actually, I super agree with that. And I think this is what sets the different leaders apart. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I can't change this, I can't change that. But when there's something that you can actually change, it's the culture and, of course, your psychology, right? So I'll be talking about it right now. And as you can see on screen, there are different pictures. So I'll be just talking about it based on my experiences. So where I have consulted, where I've given talks and worked for, whether it's Fortune 500 or it's the Ministry of National Defense of my country, which is Korea, and the United Nations, which I work for as a in the United Nations Armistice Commission, right? Like you mentioned. So yeah, and my background, just so everybody knows where I'm coming from, is from the humanities, right? So just to give you a quick background, I studied the humanities, then further studied military science, as well as studied behavioral science and organization development. So this was a mix of all these things. So what does this mean? You might say that these studies are very far from each other, right? But actually, it's really not, because humanities is there for me to understand the human beings, right? Military science is more of the build, or maybe even, I mean, as a joke, I always say destroy, right? And behavioral science is to really shape, also with organizations and development. So is to shape people. So it's all about people. And this is what we call company culture design, as you've mentioned. And company culture design is what we do is we try to get different information out of people, right? And really understand the behavioral economics behind it, science, because which AI cannot do, because the people in the Philippines, the people in Korea, or the people in, let's say, the United States have completely different understanding and cultures, so they actually react differently to people. So that's what we actually do to understand what their behavior is based on the information, because a certain information can be taken differently by different cultures, right? And then from there, we discover emerging trends and needs, which leads to whatever intervention that we actually have. So the intervention can be a consulting, a framework, right? I think you are a consultant too, right? I'm not really sure if that's the case.
Roger that. I
Oh,
do
yeah.
consulting work as well as training and facilitating.
Yeah, so there, like training and facilitating is also an intervention that we actually tailor fit, right, for different people. So that's pretty much what we do, so that at the end the organization, right, understands. So everybody in the organization understands first why they're there, what
Yeah.
they're supposed to do, and because they know this, they choose to work because they want to, not because they have to. So that's really the goal of the company. Which brings me to, if you are a leader, this is one thing that you have to really take into consideration. So whether you're from the military like me, whether you're from corporate or even the medical field, any field, is to not try to change people, right? You have to understand them and create the environment where they choose to change. So that's something that I want to really start with. And I'm sure you might also have some thoughts or reflections on this, right? Maybe you've experienced this before, that you tried to change people, but when you change the environment, they actually changed rather than trying to keep changing the individual. So I don't know if you have experiences in that. Do
I
you?
have, as a matter of fact, whenever I conduct team building, at least before the pandemic,
Yeah.
by changing the environment that teams often find themselves in, and
Mm-hmm,
say
mm-hmm,
taking them outdoors, they do behave differently. There's more a spirit of cooperation when they
mm-hmm,
realize that outdoors there's no
mm-hmm.
7-Eleven, there's no mercury drug, there's no you know so when I talk to them about, some of you will have to be hunter gatherers, some of you will have to be foragers, some of you will be in environmental control, others will be in security. The willingness to volunteer is so much
Yeah.
quicker than
Mm-hmm.
if they were in the office.
Yeah, of course. And I can explain that very quickly. It's because humans, if they're placed in a situation or a place where they're not familiar with, they try to look for patterns, or they try to look for the first thing that is close to them. So which is other human beings, right? That's how psychology works. So that's why I guess people are more eager to help. People are more eager to form groups and be in teams because that's the safest space that they can go to. So, I mean, that's just a quick trivia that I wanted to share based on your experience, right? So, the outline of the session is very quick. We're just going to be talking about two things, right? Two things, meaning it's really about first understanding, okay? And when we understand, is putting that understanding into action. So, what are the things that we can do, right? Because understanding, it doesn't stop there. You have to put it into action to be able to move forward, right? And
Right.
after the action, you have to go back to understanding because it's a cycle that you have to go forever and ever, right? That's pretty much the short uh, saying of that. So let's try to go to understand first. So, like I said, we have only two things to talk about. It's understand and act. Let's go to the first. So I would like to say this is more of a review for everyone because I think we all know this, right? We all know this. It's more of we just need to be reminded about the behaviors, the emotions, the culture, and anxiety of people.
Mm.
So first, let's go to understanding. Okay. So when we go to understanding, we have to understand people's emotions and behavior, and of course, anxiety, because of the fact that with the pandemic, I'll just say it right now, that a lot of people have been talking about anxiety, right? Everybody. I mean, did you have any experience? Do you have any staff members? I'm just curious who, or is this a buzzword that's going around these days for you?
Um,
Anxiety.
one of the popular topics on the Leader's Edge
Mm-hmm.
has to do with fighting depression,
Mm.
has to do with considering the morale of the people, especially those
Yeah.
who are now required to work from home,
Mm-hmm.
and even the more damaged morale of those who have to work to the office because there's no public transportation at all.
Yeah. True.
And
True. True.
so there is so much stress going on right now, and yes, it's a
Mm-hmm.
hot topic, dealing with
Yes.
anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing that we have to do. A lot of people, yes, have anxiety. I mean, as human beings, we feel this, but understanding where this comes from is always good. So I'll be explaining that in a simple scientific way, if you may, right? If I may ask that. So this is what we call the flow state, which is by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. That's how you spell it, and that's how you pronounce it. It's kind of hard, but it just states this: Okay, if your skills are very high, so I think you can see my pen writing. I'm not sure if you can
Yes.
see it. Just tell me if you do. If your skills are too high, but your challenges are low to this level, okay, then what we will feel is what we call boredom.
Mm.
Okay, so boredom. So I'll just write it like that. Oh, it's not writing properly. So anyway, so I will just try it again. Okay, I guess my pen doesn't work now. So
All right.
I'll just say that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If your skills are too high and your challenges are too low, then you will get bored. People will get bored. If your challenges are very high and your skills are very low, people will start getting what we call anxiety.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's really up to us if ever we do get too much challenges is to up our skills, right? And if our skills are too high, we have to up our challenges. And for example, right now the pandemic, our skills are too low for the challenge of the pandemic. That's why it's in the upper gray area, which is anxiety, right?
Mm.
And what this is trying to say is that you have to be able to get into the middle to this side, okay, to be able to get to what we call the flow state. So that is what we call the flow state.
I'm familiar with that topic
Yeah.
because one of our guests spoke about that,
Hmm.
and it's a wonderful condition where the human mind and the human body are so well aligned
Hmm.
that challenges are faced with very little anxiety, and in fact at that moment they're experiencing their ikigai, as it might be
Yeah.
called, their sense of purpose, their
True.
sense of
True.
joy in what they're doing.
Mhm. Yeah. So, like for example, right now, it's a very good example. My skills maybe I am used to presenting with my pen actually working. But right now, the challenge is the internet or maybe the computer is not making me actually write on screen. So, me trying to adapt to this actually gives me a bit of anxiety because the challenges is something that I have never experienced before. So,
Mhm.
right? So, that's something. And that's where anxiety comes from. And people just have to understand that, okay, if you're able to put up your skill and maybe adapt to it, you can go back to, like you said, the flow, the ikigai, or whatever you want to call that. So that's a very good example out of the what's happening right now, right?
Mm.
But we always have to understand that emotions, okay, and behaviors are two different things, right? Emotions are strong feelings from one circumstances, as well as behavior, on the other hand, is a set of actions that a person has done that made them survive till today. And what people should understand is that they cannot actually control emotions. They should be controlling their behavior. So
Right.
stress actually comes from people trying to change their thoughts and saying, oh, I shouldn't be angry. Oh, I shouldn't be mad. But it's perfectly normal for a human being to be mad. It really depends on, okay, you are mad, you accept that. What is the behavior that you're going to do for it is what is needed. And this is what leaders should really have all the time because of the fact that most of the leaders might have what we call the curse of knowledge, meaning they don't
Okay.
remember how they feel or how they have felt when they did not know this certain topic before, right? So that's something that the leaders should understand, that which I would say that emotions are not a choice, the behavior is. So you
True.
have to accept whatever emotions that you feel, right? Whatever, maybe it's anger, happiness, and all of these things, but really think and take a step back and say, okay, how am I supposed to behave towards this moving forward? Right, so that's something that leaders should really have in mind before anything else, because you can have all the tools and materials in the world, but if you cannot do this, then you'd actually have a hard time moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and just to tell everyone, maybe they might say, no, I don't want to have anxiety because it's weak, it's sad. I mean, I'm a good leader. But anxiety is not weakness of character. I just want to really say that and say that it's okay. It's really how you behave. What's the outcome of it is what's important, rather than what you're feeling at that moment, right?
Mm.
So yeah, that's something that you could look into.
If I could,
Any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to validate what you just shared. At the start of this pandemic,
Hmm.
when people didn't quite realize that something was up or something was wrong. Consultants, trainers like you and I,
Yeah.
facilitators, we were doing live classes, and we were so enamored with that. We were so comfortable with the status quo because our skills and the
Yeah.
challenges were well matched.
Hmm.
So we were earning well, we were adapting, everything was cool.
True.
And then the pandemic arrived. And so what happened was live classes are no longer possible. And where
Yeah.
that
True.
left a lot of people, especially those unable to make the pivot to the digital world or to online classes, was suddenly no business, no classes, no clients. Of course, everybody's worried about getting sick,
Yeah.
contagion. What I found myself experiencing was intense anxiety during the initial moments. And
Hmm.
my behavior, I guess this is what you're sharing, is that we can choose how we behave. My behavior became a desire to be able to make the pivot as quickly as possible. So
Hmm.
it was amazing that in just a month and a half, I self-taught myself video editing, sound
Yeah.
editing,
Yeah.
learn to use Canva, Snap, you name it. They've all been Appa me. So before you know it, I'm hosting the show,
Yeah.
uploading
Congratulations.
to YouTube. And now my biggest challenge is getting the rest of our talents to make
Hmm.
the pivot themselves, because it's one thing that I managed to do it, but the others are still really, really grappling with it. Um,
Yeah.
you know how it is, the comfort zone, and nobody wants to leave it because they're so used to it. And then here I
Yeah.
am
True.
trying to pull them kicking and screaming into the digital world, and there's a lot of resistance. So I understand what you're saying. We need to create the environment that makes the challenge less frightening, less stressful for them, so that their actions can follow it with something more akin to curiosity rather than fear.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. So yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences too. And just so other people would know, the way that you could have behaved would be you could have blamed the pandemic and say, "I'm not going to learn this. I'm just going to wait for it to end." Right? I mean, that's also another way to behave, right? You could also just blame it completely and change your career. That can be another thing. So yeah, it just means that humans have the ability to be able to choose how they would react to a certain thing, and that's what differentiates us from animals, right? And that's how why we have the brain. So there. Anyway, so speaking of that, since you've mentioned environment, I'll be talking about culture. So culture, to be very, everybody's talking about culture, but culture is really the environment that people are in, right? The culture of Japan is different from the culture of the Philippines, culture of Korea, because of the environment that they grew up in, right? And what I want to share is that a lot of people say, I want to have this kind of culture, but culture is really something that is done even with a lack of directive, right? So, what does that mean? If your staff members, your workers, or even your, I don't know, co-workers, I mean, facilitators, co-facilitators, whatever they do, maybe during their free time, whatever they do when there is no direction, that is their culture, right? That is their culture. And it doesn't mean it's good or bad. Certain cultures are good for certain work, and yeah, right, that's what we know. And we can actually see this through what we call the culture map, which I will show you in a few seconds. But just so people know, you cannot change a culture unless you actually know where it is at that moment in time. You can't say that, oh, I want a culture of openness for people and not know if they are open at this moment or not. So a culture map is something that you can actually use. So this is what it looks like, right? This is what a culture map looks like. And it's just asking you about 8 points, right? 8 points that you look at. But here you can see, because this is an example, I'll just show you something that was done to a company that I consult for. Right? I'm not going to mention the name because of NDAs. Of course, I tweaked some things so that I can use it as an example. So this is basically what a company culture looks like. They can be direct in their communication, meaning they're direct to the point. If they don't like it, they would say, I don't like this. Or nonverbal, meaning they can say that, oh, they use euphemisms, making maybe you can change this even if they don't like it, things like that. So feedback is the same way. Ranks, meaning is it hierarchical or is it are they a flat organization? So understanding where you are, okay, where your organization is at certain cultures, and understanding where they are is very, very important, so that you know what's your starting point when you want to change to an ideal culture. So here's just examples of. Uh, so how did I get to this? Right. I just made a survey asking a few questions on, okay, how do people feel about what their culture is in their company, and then you'll be easily able to find this out. Then of course you would decide if, okay, for our company, like let's use this example. Let's say, oh, time is very flexible, right? People make tasks based on whatever's urgent, right? But let's say I'm a research firm, right? I'm a research firm. I work for a research firm, and I say, oh, time cannot be flexible when you're researching. You have to be on the dot. So, what is the environment right now that makes the time so flexible that people are like that? Then you start changing it so that your dot over there where it's in time is flexible can go to time is on the dot, right? So, or structured. So a lot of people fail or forget to do this, right? They try to change cultures without understanding where are at that point. Because if you don't know this, you wouldn't know which environments you have to actually change, right? So that's something that we have to look at.
That's a
So any
wonderful insight.
experiences?
Yeah, I love those insights because I agree with you. Maybe we shouldn't name the
Yeah,
companies
no,
that
no, we shouldn't.
serve. But believe you me, I once was I experienced culture shock when I visited a client's office where I found some of their employees asleep at the
Mm,
lobby
mm.
where they serve brewed coffee. And I said you could smell the wonderful scent of. I would have visited that office just for the brewed coffee, but totally surprised. People were passed out in their lobbies, and then when I went to a different floor, which required a different ID tag, I saw people roaming around on skateboards and playing
Wow.
ping pong and other things, and not wearing an office uniform. And I just couldn't help it. I finally asked their HR person, "Is this an office or is this like the YMCA? What's going on here?" And the long and short of it was that she told me, Dino, this is what makes them productive. The P word, productive. And I said, how you figure they'll be productive? You know, they're playing, they're sleeping, they're relaxing. And she said, that shouldn't be your question. Your question should be, how do they behave in terms of their deliverables? And so, okay, I'll play with you. What's their deliverables? What's it like? And she said, do you know they prefer to stay here rather than go home? Okay, yeah, I agree. The coffee's great. You can play ping pong anytime you like. You can take a nap if you have to. You even have sleeping beds under their desk. And so, how does that help? And she goes, well, because when they're trying to crack a problem in code, when they're coding and their head hurts because it's too much for them, what they do is they take a break. They invite people to play ping pong, like a really fast game of pong. And after 5 minutes, being able to distract themselves causes a light bulb moment, the aha, sit down and they continue writing code. And then when they're tired, they take a nap. Then they get up, they continue writing. They're able to finish their projects at a fraction of the time they normally would if they'd gone to their usual 8-hour days and they go home and come back. So I said, oh, on that basis, you're right. I'm just thrown for a loop because this is not my company culture, but this is yours. And I guess if it works for you, then fine.
Yeah, it's very interesting because a company culture for that company might not obviously work for a company like mine, research, right? So, for example, with your example, you can say if you look at the fifth one, it says your trust is transactional and trust is social. You can see that company that you've mentioned, their culture of trust is transactional. So as long as you get the job done, we trust you, right? But
Right.
for some other companies, their trust is social. What does that mean? I trust you because you're my friend. I trust you because we have something in common, right? So that's also something that we could actually look at. So very, very interesting example. Thank you for sharing that. And again, I would say the first step that if you want to change your culture, change something, like something's not working, your culture's not working, is to look at the culture map. Right, so that's something that you can do there. How you can do it? It can be a quick survey. Of course, you can hire people like us, or even do it yourself if your company is maybe less than 100 people, because that's easy to do. But maybe 100 above, that you can get professionals to do the surveys for you, right? So yeah, very interesting. And the next thing that I want to for leaders to understand is that yes, this is actually some sort of asking for help, and leaders don't really do that. They don't ask questions. They don't really much ask for help because they think that leaders should have all the answers. But to be very honest, I mean, they should be the people who should ask the questions most of the time. And which leads me to the next thing in understanding is to ask for help, right? I mean, I also do this, right? I learn new things from other people. Like I learned new things from you today based on your examples, right? Even if it was my slides, right? So a lot of people actually ask me also, where do I get my asking? Because these days I'm not able to talk to people face to face, and I've found a lot of different maybe HR tools or even coaches online. So not the life coaches. So these are different. Life coaches are different, but professional coaches. Because I always believe that even athletes and all these people, you really do need coaches, right? And just to share you what I use, maybe you'll be interested. I actually use a platform called Loop HR, loophr.ph. I use this because they're more Philippine context. I mean, it's good. It's good to have a coaching outside, maybe from all these maybe Western companies or outsourced companies outside of the country. But it's always good to have someone inside because the culture is so different, right? And so that you also don't get culture shock. So I use this platform in order to understand, like for example, the 13th month pay. I'll just give you an example. The 13th month pay is something that is only in the Philippines that is required. Other
Oh,
countries, like for example in Korea, I would say, huh? People would say, what? Really? Why would I give 13-month pay? Right? We're already giving them a bonus, right? Why? But here you would see there's 13 months pay and there's a bonus. And
right.
for someone, yeah, I mean, if you don't understand that, you'll have a hard time. You'll have a hard time. Also, some of the things, there are different government offices you may be the best consultant in the US, let's say. But if you can't put it into context, you can't. This is why I say you always have to ask for help. So for me, yes, I understand the culture of the Philippines because I learned it, I studied it, right? But still, I still want to learn from the people who already have been there and who has been the CHROs before, who have been the VPs, who have been the CEOs of these companies, who are just consulting now. So this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 7,000 for 4 sessions. So you can ask everything that you want, everything that you want, and then that's what I usually do. If I don't understand something, or if I'm confused, or even a second eye to look at things, then I use something like this. Of course, I just gave an example, but there are other tools out there. I just showed this because this is in the Philippine context. Yeah. So these are people from from high up positions of the X telecommunication companies. Those people who actually established these companies before. And yeah, it's always good to ask these people. And people might say, "Oh, that's too much." I don't feel like 7,000, or even I think 2,500 per session. I'm not really sure. I might be mistaken, but I think it's worth it. The change
I
that you
agree.
can do is
Yeah.
more than that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
right? Well, so yeah.
Th-
So understanding is basically that.
mhm.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to say? Sorry.
Oh, just remarking that the rate that you were describing,
Yeah.
7,000, 2,000, is quite reasonable and certainly very affordable. And that makes your tip a beautiful resource for our audience because most of our viewers are into HR,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
facilitating or consulting. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no, no worries. I mean, this has been helpful, so I would love to share things, and it's local, so yeah. I mean, I've used different platforms, yes, but you always have to put it into context, right?
Mm.
So yeah. So that's for understanding. That was our first whole line of understanding.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah. So and yeah.
yeah, maybe just a quick question. Considering how
Mhm.
you
Go ahead.
also looked at, say, psychology and the study of the human psyche,
Mm-hmm.
um, how resilient do you think the Filipinos are at the moment? Because one thing that we have set a record for in this country, at least, is we have
Mm.
had the longest
Yeah.
lockdown on the planet, and
Yes. 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 True.
it's driving a lot of people up the wall.
Yeah.
Um, how would you describe our psyche? What are your
Ah.
thoughts?
I'll come from a very constructive standpoint because I can always say, because everybody has been saying that people are very resilient with these things, and I completely agree with that. But just to give you, because every time when I get asked that question, I say, yeah, they're very resilient, but they're like, oh, what can be improved? So
Yeah.
I would say that right now, right? When it comes to resiliency or trying to find out things, you call it descarte, right? So madiscarte, the Filipinos, right? But one thing that I see is that in terms of adversity, maybe follow through could be improved, right? The ideas are there, the actions are there, but when it becomes when it's in a long term, it's more of maybe think longer term, and at the same time, people should follow through more because I see so many things getting started, but it doesn't end, or it just ends in the middle. I see a lot of people, as long as they're comfortable, they stop it, right? So it's not a bad thing, but it could have been better, right? That's what I mean. If there's follow through or if they continue it. But yeah,
I, I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing your feedback. I've been to countries like Taiwan, for example, because
Mhm.
I have two sister-in-laws who work there,
Mhm.
and I couldn't help but really admire uh, the discipline of the people there, their work ethic,
Yeah.
and how trustworthy they were. Like if you left a baby stroller out on the sidewalk in front of your condo, you
Mhm.
go back 2 days later, it's still there. You know, it didn't
Yeah.
disappear. Um, the only thing that I struggled with over there was the language barrier because
Yeah.
I don't speak it. But otherwise, I was just so amazed how unmaterialistic they were. So I tend to agree with you. Projects
Mhm.
need to be followed through to completion.
Mhm.
Um, if I may, you
Yeah.
shared
Sure.
earlier that your company does consulting work and to help shape the culture of organizations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Of
so
course.
you also brought up a unique point where you said they need to know where they're at first before they can
Mhm.
decide where they want to go.
Yeah.
So as a first step, do you do like a pre-work? Do you send out surveys, invite people to participate in focus group discussions online or something like that?
Yeah, during pre-pandemic, we would actually do it using maybe Lego Serious Play. So it's really bringing out the subconscious of people because most of the time when you do surveys or when surveys are not crafted in a certain way, people, without them knowing, tend to also lie, right?
Yeah.
And it's human behavior. I mean, it's I'm not saying that people are liars, right? It's just really it's our survival instincts kicking in to make ourselves look better than we actually are. right?
Yeah.
That's what people do. So we use different methods, whether it's surveys, whether it's some activities, workshops, to really figure out, okay, how are people acting right now? And then we actually do a report on that, right? And show them, okay, this is how you are. Maybe this is why you say your performance in this level is high. It's because of these behaviors, right? Your performance in this level is low because of these behaviors also. So yeah, we do pre-work if you were asking, but it's not just a simple survey. It's different things put together. Yeah. Actually, it's not just the businesses. I think as a culture as a whole, the Philippines is one of the Asian countries who are quote unquote scared of math,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just the company owners. It's as a general. I mean, as a general, I would be the perfect example of that. I've studied some of my studies here in the Philippines, and because of that, I'm one of those Koreans who actually fear math. So,
Oh.
but people would think that I'm good in math, but yeah, I had this notion that I actually feared math. But when I studied it, I mean, yeah, it's just the subconscious always telling me that I might not be good in math because
Mm.
it's because of the culture, right? The environment that I was in because I studied here. But does it actually hinder me from learning? No, again, it's the behavior. You feel that you're scared, but if you put the action, your behavior is learning it, then like you, learning all these virtual things, then you'll be able to do it. That's why
Indeed.
the leadership understanding is very important. The mindset's very important, like you've said.
And so I guess we could end our segment right here.
Yeah, sure.
And once more, I'd like to thank you for gracing our show with your
No
thoughts.
worries.
And I'd like to invite our guests to look forward to part two of this episode, where Daily will continue to explain. So after the part that talked about the understanding of it, then we can move on to the culture of it, and especially the acting on. So, with that, I'd like to remind everybody that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Merry Christmas. Good night.